It is March 1969. The U.S. conducts secret bombing raids on Viet Cong troops and supply routes inside the nation of Cambodia. Authorized by the newly installed United States President Richard Nixon and directed by his National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger, the raids are illegal, and the U.S. has not officially declared war on Cambodia, but rather its current enemy in the war, Viet Cong troops. In 14 months, 110,000 tons of bombs are dropped on the Cambodian landscape and civilians. Bombing raids into Cambodia will continue until 1973. Over 500,000 tons of explosives will be dropped on the country. The tonnage is about 3.5 times more than that dropped on Japan during the Second World War. Top secret military cables were obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. These were part of a cover-up that was the real beginning of Watergate. Pilots were sworn not to tell even their superiors about the bombings, and their flight logs were falsified. The official aim of the bombings was to wipe out a Viet Cong base in Cambodia, a base that existed only in the imagination of American generals. President Nixon's aim, however, was to show the Vietnamese and Cambodians how tough he could be. This method was called the madman method of war. The Cambodians who died in these illegal bombing raids were officially called collateral damage, and the burning villages and jungles were called friendly fire. In 1970, America invaded Cambodia in pursuit of Vietnamese. Later, Nixon was apprehended, not for the destruction of Cambodia, but for the Watergate scandal, and Dr. Henry Kissinger later received the Nobel Peace Prize for making peace in international affairs. The Watergate tapes that were vandalized were actually recorded discussions between Nixon and Kissinger, planning and conferencing about the illegal bombing raids in Cambodia and other shady topics. The upcoming election caused Nixon to order the tapes destroyed. This was ultimately his downfall. In 1975, a radical and revolutionary period erupts in Cambodia. Communist leader Pol Pot rises to power and becomes a head figure in events that would turn the nation of Cambodia upside down and cause the brutal death of 1.7 million innocent Cambodian men, women, and children. Seeking to fix the nation that the Vietnam War and American bombs had devastated, Pol Pot drove his ideals with the Khmer Rouge, a band of youthful soldiers armed with Soviet Union weapons. The Khmer Rouge fought against the invading Vietnamese guerrillas, American soldiers, and the very own Cambodians. In 1949, Pol Pot earned a scholarship from the Cambodian government to study radio electronics in Paris, but instead became extremely fascinated and indoctrinated by the ideals of Marxism and radical communism. In Cambodia, he rose to power and strove to make the country great again by rebuilding the empire of Angkor Wat from ground level and from what he would call Year Zero. Pol Pot declares Year Zero a program to purify Cambodian society of Western culture, capitalism, religion, and all other foreign influences. No opposition is tolerated. Death and torture are the penalties.
For us, we could think of caveman. He wanted to do is start over, completely start over with that civilization. Just farming, living in villages. If you can imagine a complete absence of technology, no metal tools even, working with stones and sticks to farm the land. He believed that that's how the people would be the best off.
Cambodia is located in Southeast Asia, neighboring Vietnam, Thailand, and Laos. The nation is about the size of Missouri, consuming almost 70,000 square miles. Its capital is Phnom Penh, and the nation is commonly known for its tourist beaches and ancient wonder of the world, Angkor Wat Palace and Temple. The spoken language is Khmer. emergence of the Khmer Rouge into Phnom Penh on April 17, 1975, caused an explosive chain of events that debatably could have been avoided. Would Cambodia be better off had the illegal bombings ordered by Nixon and Kissinger not taken place?
Cambodia and what Pol Pot did is widely regarded as the most successful Marxist experiment that we've seen so far historically. Prior to that time, there were about 10 million people in Cambodia. That was the total population. Pol Pot, by execution and starvation, terminated about a third of the population.
The Khmer Rouge had many tactics to cleanse the population. One well-known tactic is called the killing fields, where nearly 1 million Cambodian citizens who were old and educated were forced at gunpoint to walk shoulder to shoulder into open clearings in the dense jungle and detonate hidden landmines buried by the enemy Vietnamese soldiers during the ongoing Vietnam War. Other cruel and evil tactics were shooting on sight a citizen who wore glasses, was found in a school, or with books.
This is the end, my only friend, the end of our elaborate.
So Pol Pot found a voice and an audience in his ideas, but of course, as all communist experiments go, it quickly disintegrated into just mass murder and killing all the revolutionaries, the enemies of the state.
I'll never look into your eyes again.
Before the killing fields, Cambodia was on her way up. It was one of the bright spots of Southeast Asia. It's much more advanced than Singapore. Now those conditions are reversed. Cambodia has been, over the last 10 years, one of the poorest countries on earth. Of course, there was an entire generation, or most of it, the intelligentsia, as we say, the educated, were all killed off. So you've got a country even now that is entirely ignorant. Of course, some of the brightest people on earth, but ignorant, without education. You still only have just over 10 million people, so and a small language, so there aren't many books in the language. There's not much opportunity for education, so conditions are fairly dismal. Living conditions, the standard of living is quite poor. When Cambodia was, you'd say, freed from the Pol Pot regime, that happened by way of, in 1979, Vietnam invaded and displaced the Pol Pot regime, deposed him. Pol Pot fled into hiding in the jungle until he was killed or died really only about 10 years ago. He hid in the jungle for a long time.
Khmer Rouge records from the Tao Sang Interrogation and Detention Center in Phnom Penh show that 17,000 men, women, and children were tortured and executed from 1975 to 1978. Only 7 of those 17,000 survived the brutality. When Vietnam liberated Cambodia and wiped out the Khmer Rouge, the people of Cambodia had a new beginning to rebuild their country. The nation now stands impoverished and with a severe lack of intelligence, and are learning to thrive again.